The SCP Foundation faces off against a number of incomprehensible, impossibly dangerous threats every single day. They've gotten so used to containing terrifying monsters and world-ending anomalies that it's really just all in a day's work for them. But what if there was something that scared even the most jaded Foundation personnel? Something that none of them could track, understand, or even see. In the 1990s, employees of the SCP Foundation began to disappear without a trace. At first, the higher-ups assumed it was traumatized personnel making a break for it after they'd seen something that finally made them snap. But that wouldn't account for all the blood. At the site of every disappearance, the last place anyone saw the missing person before they were gone, there was a massive amount of blood left behind. Not an "I cut my thumb while chopping onions" amount of blood, but an "I'm missing a limb" amount of blood. Buckets and buckets of what was confirmed to be the missing person's blood were found, spilled all over the scene of their disappearance. The first recorded instance of this phenomenon was captured via security footage of a laboratory late at night. There, Dr. Porter was sat in his lab chair finishing up some tests, running potentially anomalous soil samples through a variety of machines. The room was mostly dark, save for the light of a small desk lamp. Suddenly, he looked up from his work, eyes darting around the room. He couldn't see anything, but he could feel it. There was something in there with him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something horrible was about to happen, and not about to stick around and see what it would be. He made a break for the door. Just before his outstretched arm reached the handle, he jerked back into the room as if pulled back by his hair. He looked around wildly for his assailant, but there was nothing there that he could see. The security footage showed him jerked around, thrashing his arms as he tried to fight off an invisible attacker for several seconds. Then, he was gone, and the pristine white tile of the laboratory was smeared with that telltale bright red. He wasn't pulled into a pocket dimension like an attack by SCP-106. He was simply there one moment and gone the next. The blood on the ground, the only sign he had ever been there at all. Dr. Porter's disappearance was troubling, but the Foundation hoped it might just be an isolated incident. Of course, nothing ever goes the way you'd hope when you're dealing with SCPs, and within the next 6 months, 3 more personnel had vanished in the same way. The phenomenon, whatever was causing it, had a few simple rules it seemed to play by. It occurred on a cycle of 1 to 3 months. It only happened to Foundation personnel, and it always happened in a dark place where visibility was limited. Understandably unsettled, many personnel stopped coming into work, afraid they might be next. Unfortunately for them, the phenomenon was not limited to the area within the Foundation's walls. It could find them no matter how far they ran, as soon as they were in the dark. You can't fight, outrun, or outsmart the setting sun or your bedside lamp going dead. Research Assistant Sanchez vanished while taking a shortcut down an alley at night. Dr. Costanza was taken while she was reading a book before bed. Her blood-stained sheets, discovered days later, indicated that she didn't even have time to run. Junior researcher Wantabe disappeared from the back row of a midnight screening of Evil Dead 2. Moviegoers at the same screening reported hearing some commotion from the back, like someone hitting one of the seats and kicking their legs, but they assumed it was just a massive Bruce Campbell fan excited about the movie. The noise only lasted for a few seconds anyway. And so the pattern continued, and every couple of months, one member of the Foundation staff vanished, leaving behind only blood and a sense of dread. None of the missing staff, dead or alive, were ever found. The phenomenon was assigned the designation SCP-835-JP, and though they tried to come up with a plan to contain it or put a stop to it, many accepted it as simply another occupational hazard in an increasingly long list that came with doing the Foundation's work. Just when it was beginning to look like there would never be a way to prevent new brushes with SCP-835 short of never being alone in the dark ever again, something weird and wonderful happened. In a Japanese SCP Foundation facility, during one of the phenomenon's inactive periods, a booklet entitled Artist's Impression of SCP-835-JP was found on the desk of a research assistant. It depicted a fictional character known as Keteru Yamiko, intended to be a personification of the phenomenon. Keteru Yamiko, as depicted in the booklet, is a young woman drawn in a traditional anime and manga art style. She is pale, with blue eyes and long black hair. and is dressed in a classic Japanese school uniform. In addition to her design, the booklet also describes the character's abilities and backstory. Keteru is described as a type of assassin with expertise in predatory ambush. A santoku knife is her weapon of choice. She also displays anomalous abilities with regard to the absence of light. She is able to manipulate darkness and use dark and shadows as a weapon that she can trap her targets with. She is also able to teleport using shadows, transporting herself, objects, or her prey through shadows to remove all evidence of what she has done. The origins of Keteru's abilities are somewhat murky, but whether she was born with them or given them, she came into her unusual talents at a young age. Due to her abilities, she was found by a mysterious organization, an unknown enemy of the SCP Foundation, and abducted by them as a child. There they indoctrinated her and trained her to be a master assassin, teaching her how to use her abilities, master hand-to-hand combat, and the use of weapons, and to have the ice-cold demeanor of a perfect killer. She learned to move in the shadows and make her darkness her ultimate home and ally. Once her training was complete, Keteru was sent out into the world with one mission: to take out members of the SCP Foundation by any means necessary. According to the lore of the booklet, her killings drew the attention of the Foundation, though they did not understand who she was or who had sent her. Then they assigned her the designation of SCP-835-JP. The booklet was sent to the site's head researcher, who brought in the assistant for further questioning. The man confessed to have drawn the booklet, saying that drawing Keteru Yamiko had made him feel less afraid of the mysterious entity. By turning it into a fictional character, he was taking his sense of control back, as well as turning his fear into a chance to explore his favorite hobby, drawing. What had once been a completely unknown entity, something without a face or a motive of any kind, was now a classic anime character and something he could wrap his mind around. Also, he just thought it all looked really cool. He was reprimanded for drawing on the job and making light of a phenomenon that had taken so many of his colleagues. He was transferred to a different department, and the booklet was largely forgotten about, at least until one researcher, Dr. Sato, noticed something curious. After the discovery of the Keteru Yamiko booklet, also known as Incident 835-JP, there were no disappearances for 5 months. Another disappearance finally occurred, but the pattern, which had been so consistent before, was disrupted for the first time in a decade. Dr. Sato noticed this delay, and though his colleagues mocked him for it, drew a connection between the longer inactive period and the discovery of the Keteru Yamiko booklet. He quickly got to work and developed a proposal, Protocol Idol 835, which was approved by a head researcher desperate for some kind of solution, and promptly put it into practice. Dr. Sato's theory behind the implementation of Protocol Idol was that, somehow, SCP-835-JP was connected to and influenced by the perceptions of the Foundation personnel. In fact, it had likely originated from their collective sense of anxiety and paranoia in the first place, acting as a tulpa, or a thought made real through intense concentration and belief. Therefore, he hypothesized that by changing the staff's perception of the phenomenon from something horrifying and unknowable to an approachable and even fun fictional character, they could somehow contain it and stop any further disappearances. The goal of Protocol Idol was to create a shared version of SCP-835-JP for all of the staff to focus on, stripping the entity of its original power. Since many staff had already seen the original Keteru Yamiko booklet, she was chosen to be the shared, agreed-upon description of SCP-835-JP. With all of that decided, the protocol was officially put into place. First, all of the documents and reports that referred to SCP-835-JP were edited to include details about Keteru Yamiko, including descriptions of the character, repeated mentions of her name instead of the SCP's number, and various illustrations. In addition to changing the records, a publicity campaign was mounted to cement the idea of Keteru Yamiko in the minds of all of the staff. Keteru Yamiko's design was painted on various supplies, on the side of transport vans, on the doors to laboratories, and as murals on several walls throughout the facility. The booklet was copied and distributed around the facility as a piece of required reading. The original author of the booklet was brought back on board to design and head the creation of a variety of other reading materials, including fictional novels, manga, and short animated videos featuring Keteru Yamiko as the main character. Mandatory watch parties were held for these short animations, and free snacks and drinks were provided in order to boost morale. Several employees began jokingly referring to these watch parties as SCP Foundation Anime Club. Through the efforts of the Idol Protocol, the image and knowledge of Keteru Yamiko spread throughout the Foundation and became the dominant perception of SCP-835-JP. Since the implementation of this protocol, there have been no disappearances in line with SCP-835-JP's pattern, and the project was declared a success. Dr. Sato included this note in SCP-835-JP's file. SCP-835-JP is probably a manifestation of the instinctive fear that something threatening oneself may be lurking in the darkness. But the imaginary monster we once feared has now been reduced to a cliched character with Protocol Idol 835. Ever since the implementation of Protocol Idol 835, SCP-835-JP is considered neutralized. Its classification has been downgraded from Keter to Safe. There have been talks about strengthening the entity's containment by expanding the protocol outside of the Foundation, in order to prevent the possibility of containment breaches down the line that might be brought on by exposure to a major cognito hazard, or in-house amnestics. A special team of illustrators, animators, and writers have been brought on to spearhead the protocol, creating additional comic books, posters, and even beginning the early stages of production on a feature-length animated film about SCP-835 and her various exploits, tentatively titled Keteru Yamiko, Shadow Girl. There have been no plans made yet for international distribution, but who knows? We might just see Keteru Yamiko on the big screen one of these days. She might just end up as the first ever SCP to become a mainstream celebrity. And until then, the Foundation could also disseminate knowledge about her through other means. Say a fun little animated YouTube video. But what's the chance they'd ever pull a move like that, right? Now go check out SCP-2935 O-Death and more epic SCP stories you can't miss. And Procedure 110 Montauk revealed Fear Alone SCP-231 Tale for more mind-bending anomalous action from the SCP Foundation.